Jack Richardson laughed loudly enough for the crystal chandeliers above the ballroom to seem quieter than his voice. He pointed at the elegant navy dress stretched across his overweight wife and smirked. A luxury brand isn't made for bodies like yours, Lily. You're embarrassing the designer. A few guests chuckled. Others lowered their eyes, unwilling to interrupt the humiliation unfolding beneath the lights of Manhattan's most prestigious fashion gala. Lily Richardson neither defended herself nor looked away. She simply folded her hands and watched. No one in the room, not the celebrities, not the executives, not even the man who had just mocked her, knew they were insulting the only person who could decide the future of the luxury house they had all come to admire. If you believe dignity should never be measured by appearance, share where you're watching from and your local time in the comments. And if stories about quiet strength and justice speak to you, consider subscribing so you won't miss the next journey. The city of Chicago had a way of convincing people that appearances were evidence. Glass towers reflected tailored suits. Luxury cars lined the entrances of downtown office buildings. Fine restaurants were filled with conversations that sounded less like friendship than negotiation. Reputation traveled faster than truth. And in circles where wealth quietly measured every introduction, image often became a currency of its own. Jack Richardson understood that world perfectly. At 38, he had built a respected career as a corporate attorney, specializing in mergers and acquisitions. Clients admired his confidence. Partners praised his persuasive arguments. His colleagues often joked that Jack could sell certainty to people who had already made up their minds. He enjoyed the joke because deep inside, he believed it was true. His office overlooked the Chicago River, and every morning he spent several minutes adjusting the knot of his silk tie before the floor-to-ceiling windows. He believed expensive watches inspired confidence. Handmade Italian shoes earned respect, and designer labels quietly announced success before anyone spoke a single word. There was one luxury brand he admired above all others: Maison Étoile. Its collections rarely appeared in ordinary boutiques. Invitations to private runway events were more valuable than many business contracts. Fashion magazines called the brand timeless, while celebrities treated each new design as though it were a work of art. Jack had never met anyone from the company's ownership, but he often told friends that one day he would become Maison Étoile's chief outside legal counsel. He imagined himself walking through its New York headquarters, advising executives whose names rarely appeared in public. He never imagined that every evening he went home to the person who already owned it. Lily Richardson lived a life almost invisible to the world around her. At 35, she had long since stopped noticing the curious looks strangers gave her. Years of treatment for a thyroid condition had changed her body in ways no diet or exercise could fully reverse. Her face remained gentle, her smile warm, but her figure no longer resembled the woman she had once been. She accepted that reality long before everyone else did. Every morning, while Jack carefully selected his suits, Lily quietly prepared breakfast. She preferred simple oatmeal, fresh fruit, and coffee without sugar. Jack usually skipped breakfast. Instead, he stood beside the kitchen island, reading financial news on his tablet. Sometimes he barely looked at her. Sometimes he looked too much. "You really should stop buying loose dresses," he said one Tuesday morning without lifting his eyes from the screen. "They make you look bigger." Lily stirred her coffee slowly. "They're comfortable. They're comfortable because they hide everything." He spoke casually, not angrily, not loudly, almost as if discussing the weather. Silence settled across the kitchen. Lily did not defend herself. She simply nodded once. After Jack left for work, she opened a small leather notebook that had rested beside the fruit bowl for years. She turned to a fresh page. In neat handwriting, she wrote the date. Then, only one sentence. Jack said, "My clothes exist to hide me." She closed the notebook. No tears. No dramatic sigh. Just another quiet record among hundreds of others. The notebook never left her side. Whenever something important happened, she wrote it down. Not to gather ammunition, not to prepare revenge, only because she believed memory deserved accuracy. There were moments she often thought when people forgot what they had said. Paper rarely did. Later that morning, Lily walked through Lincoln Park, where summer sunlight filtered gently through rows of old trees. She greeted the same elderly florist she'd visited every Wednesday for nearly 4 years. She bought white lilies, always white. She never explained why. The florist never asked. Kindness sometimes required fewer questions than curiosity. Back home, Lily entered a private study on the 2nd floor. Unlike the rest of the house, this room looked more like the office of an international executive. Several encrypted laptops rested inside a locked cabinet. Shelves contained carefully organized legal binders. Financial reports occupied one entire wall. A digital clock displayed 3 cities simultaneously: Chicago, New York, Paris. At precisely 9:30, her secure laptop chimed once. An encrypted email had arrived. Subject board update. Confidential. Lily opened it immediately. The message summarized overnight developments involving Maison Étoile's upcoming global collection launch. Production schedules, European shipping, retail forecasts, media planning, legal approvals. Everything was presented in remarkable detail. She read every line carefully. Occasionally, she added brief comments. Approved. Delay until Friday. Request revised contract. Schedule board review. No greeting. No signature. Everyone receiving those instructions already knew who had written them. When she finished, she encrypted the reply and closed the computer. Moments later, her phone vibrated. "Daniel Brooks," Lily answered. "Good morning." Daniel's calm voice came through immediately. "The board approved your recommendations." "I'm glad. We've finalized preparations for next month's gala. I'll review everything tonight. There are still journalists trying to learn who owns the company. They'll keep trying. Should we issue another statement?" "No." Daniel laughed softly. "I knew that would be your answer. It always is." Their conversation lasted less than 5 minutes. Professional, efficient. Neither mentioned ownership. Neither needed to. When the call ended, Lily returned the phone to her desk drawer. She preferred conversations to leave no unnecessary traces. That afternoon, Jack came home earlier than usual. He appeared unusually excited. "You won't believe this." Lily looked up from her book. "What happened?" "Our firm has been recommended for an incredible opportunity." "What kind?" "A luxury fashion company." He smiled broadly. "Maison Étoile." Lily quietly placed a bookmark between the pages. "That sounds important. It could change everything." Jack paced across the living room. "If I impress them, this could open doors all over New York. I'm happy for you. I've spent years studying that company." He laughed proudly. "I know almost everything about them." Lily watched him without speaking. She wondered how someone could know almost everything about a company while knowing absolutely nothing about the person sitting across from him. Jack continued talking enthusiastically. The founder was a genius. He built an empire. The current leadership has protected the brand perfectly. I've read every public interview. Lily listened carefully. Every fact he mentioned had come from newspapers. Every conclusion came from assumptions. Not once did he realize The person who knew every private board decision, every confidential acquisition, every unfinished design sketch, was quietly pouring tea only a few feet away. That evening, they attended a charity dinner hosted by one of Jack's clients. The room sparkled with expensive jewelry and polished conversation. Jack introduced himself confidently to everyone important. When someone asked about Lily, he smiled politely. "My wife." Nothing more. No mention of her education, no mention of her interests, no mention of her intelligence. Just 2 words. "My wife." Later, while dessert was being served, another guest complimented Lily's calm personality. Jack answered before she could. "She's happiest staying out of the spotlight." Several people nodded. Lily smiled politely. The statement wasn't entirely false. She did prefer privacy, but there was a difference between choosing silence and having someone else define it. Driving home, rain began tapping softly against the windshield. Jack focused on the road. "You know," he said, "if I start working with Maison Étoile, we'll probably have to attend more elite events." "All right. You'll need a better wardrobe." Lily turned toward the window. "I'll think about it." Jack glanced at her briefly. "I'm serious." "So am I." Neither spoke for the rest of the drive. Back at home, Lily climbed quietly to her study once more. Another encrypted email had arrived. The subject line contained only 4 words. "Final guest list approved." She opened the attachment. Hundreds of distinguished names filled the document. Near the middle of the page, one name caught her attention. Jack Richardson. She studied it for several seconds before closing the file. Then she reached for the familiar leather notebook resting beside her keyboard. She wrote only 1 sentence beneath that day's earlier entry. "Some people spend years chasing a door without realizing they already live beside the person holding the key." The story Jack Richardson believed about Maison Étoile was the same story the public believed. It was elegant, it was inspiring, and it was incomplete. Newspapers celebrated the late founder Richard Richardson as a visionary who had transformed a small New York atelier into one of the world's most respected luxury fashion houses. Fashion critics admired his discipline. Investors admired his restraint. Designers admired his refusal to chase temporary trends. Very few people knew that his greatest creation had never appeared on a runway. It was his daughter. Long before Lily Richardson learned how to read financial statements or negotiate licensing agreements, she learned to identify fabrics simply by touching them with her fingertips. When she was 6 years old, Richard would sit her beside enormous work tables covered with silk cashmere linen and wool. He never asked which fabric was the most expensive. Instead, he would ask another question. Which one tells the most honest story? Little Lily would close her eyes, run her tiny fingers across each material, and think carefully before answering. Richard never corrected her. He simply smiled. "Fashion isn't about making people wish they had another body," he often told her. "It's about making them feel that the body they already have deserves beauty." Those words became the quiet foundation of Lily's life. While many children spent weekends watching cartoons, Lily wandered through design studios. She watched pattern makers adjust tiny measurements. She listened to seamstresses discuss balance, proportion, and movement. She learned that a single stitch placed incorrectly could change the entire structure of a garment. Richard insisted that everyone in the company treat her like an apprentice instead of an heir. She swept studio floors, organized fabric samples, delivered sketches between departments, served coffee during meetings. No one was allowed to give her special treatment. "If you inherit respect," Richard liked to say, "you'll lose it the moment people discover it wasn't earned." By the time Lily entered high school, she had already filled dozens of notebooks with dress sketches. None carried her name. Richard quietly submitted several designs under anonymous internal review. Senior designers praised them. Some argued they represented the freshest ideas the company had seen in years. Only after the decisions were finalized did Richard reveal who had created them. The room had fallen silent. Not because they doubted her, because they hadn't realized talent could appear so quietly. Years later, Lily enrolled at one of New York's most respected design schools. She refused to use the Richardson family name. She introduced herself simply as Lily Brooks, using her late mother's maiden name. She wanted criticism, not protection. Her professors remembered her as unusually observant. While other students hurried to present bold concepts, Lily spent hours watching how ordinary people moved through subway stations, parks, museums, and coffee shops. She filled notebooks with small observations. A woman constantly pulling down the sleeves of a jacket because it felt too tight. An older man adjusting his collar before entering a restaurant. A teenager smiling for the first time after finding a dress that actually fit comfortably. To Lily, clothing wasn't decoration. It was emotion translated into fabric. During her final year, Richard invited her to design a capsule collection for Maison Étoile. No publicity, no announcement. Just one quiet experiment. The collection sold out within 48 hours. Fashion journalists praised its unusual elegance. Customers described the garments with words rarely associated with luxury fashion. Comfort, confidence, freedom. Richard never publicly identified the designer. Instead, he took Lily to dinner overlooking the Hudson River. "You've discovered something," he said. Lily looked confused. "What?" "Most luxury brands try to change people." He smiled gently. "You make people feel accepted before they even look in the mirror." She never forgot those words. Everything changed 2 years later. Richard Richardson suffered a massive heart attack during a business trip to London. Despite every effort by doctors, he never regained consciousness. His death shocked the fashion world. Television channels replayed old interviews for days. Magazine covers described the end of an era. What almost no journalist knew was that Richard had spent the previous 5 years quietly preparing his daughter for exactly this moment. 1 week after the funeral, the board of directors gathered inside Maison Étoile's headquarters in Manhattan. Present were the company's CEO, Daniel Brooks, Chief Operating Officer Sarah Bennett, Chief Financial Officer Thomas Green, General Counsel Michael Hayes, along with several independent board members who had served Richard for decades. Lily entered the boardroom wearing a simple navy dress. No designer logo, no jewelry beyond her mother's wedding ring. She looked younger than many had expected. But when the meeting began, uncertainty disappeared. Richard's attorney placed a sealed envelope on the conference table. Inside rested the founder's final instructions. His will transferred controlling ownership of Maison Étoile to Lily Richardson. Not partially, entirely. Every voting share, every intellectual property right, every design archive, every future decision. But the document contained one condition that surprised even the board. Lily's ownership would remain confidential unless she personally decided otherwise. The CEO would continue serving as the public face of the company. Board members would sign permanent confidentiality agreements. No interview, no press release, no corporate biography would reveal the identity of the owner. Some directors questioned the decision. Richard had anticipated that. His attorney unfolded another handwritten letter. "My daughter has spent her life learning to create beauty rather than attention. Do not force her to become famous in order to prove she deserves what she has earned. Protect her privacy with the same devotion you protect this company." The room remained silent. Daniel Brooks was the first to speak. "We'll honor his wishes." Every board member agreed. That same afternoon, they each signed new legal agreements. From that moment forward, the owner of one of the world's most valuable luxury brands officially disappeared from public view. Years passed. The arrangement worked remarkably well. Daniel managed daily operations. Sarah oversaw global expansion. Michael protected the company's legal interests. Every major decision, however, still required Lily's approval. She reviewed contracts, acquisitions, creative direction, executive appointments, even store locations. Sometimes meetings lasted hours. Sometimes Lily answered with only one sentence, always after asking thoughtful questions no one else had considered. Inside the company, people quietly admired her judgment. Outside the company, almost no one knew she existed. During those same years, another chapter of Lily's life quietly unfolded. She met Jack Richardson through mutual friends at a charity fundraiser in Chicago. Jack was charming, confident, ambitious without appearing arrogant. He asked thoughtful questions. He listened carefully. Unlike many people, he didn't seem impressed by wealth. Or so Lily believed. She never mentioned Maison Étoile. She introduced herself simply as a freelance consultant working with several private investment groups. Technically, it wasn't a lie. She did advise investment decisions. She simply omitted the company those decisions belonged to. Their relationship developed naturally. Weekend walks, long conversations, books exchanged over coffee. Jack admired Lily's intelligence. Lily admired what she believed was his kindness. When he proposed 2 years later beside Lake Michigan, she accepted without hesitation. She informed only 3 people before the wedding: Daniel Brooks, Sarah Bennett, Michael Hayes. All 3 attended quietly. None revealed her secret. Marriage brought happiness. At first, Jack supported her independence. He respected her privacy. He never questioned why she occasionally traveled to New York for confidential meetings. Whenever she returned, she explained only that work had gone well. He accepted the answer. Then life changed. Not because Lily became different, because her body did. A thyroid disorder developed gradually after years of chronic stress and hormonal complications. Medication helped stabilize her health. It did not restore her former appearance. Within 18 months, she gained significant weight. Doctors assured her she had done nothing wrong. Jack listened politely during appointments. He nodded when physicians explained the condition. But as months passed, understanding quietly gave way to embarrassment. The first sarcastic comment seemed harmless. Then another. Then another. Lily noticed each one. Not because they were loud, because they became ordinary. She never argued. She simply continued writing in the same leather notebook that now contained not only business ideas and design sketches, but also moments she hoped would someday make sense. Looking back, she would later realize something heartbreaking. Jack had fallen in love with the woman he believed she looked like. He never truly learned to see the woman she actually was. And somewhere between success, ambition, and appearances, he had begun admiring a luxury brand far more faithfully than the quiet woman who owned it. By the beginning of September, preparations for Maison Étoile's annual gala had reached their final stage. Inside the company's Manhattan headquarters, dozens of departments worked in perfect synchronization. Public relations teams reviewed guest confirmations. Creative directors inspected the runway one final time. Security managers coordinated with local authorities. Every flower arrangement, every lighting angle, every seat assignment was examined repeatedly. The event was more than another fashion show. It marked the unveiling of Maison Étoile's most important collection in nearly a decade. Fashion editors from Paris, Milan, London, Tokyo, and New York had already confirmed their attendance. Hollywood actors, professional athletes, luxury investors, museum curators, even several European royal representatives had accepted invitations. Millions of people would eventually see photographs from that evening. Only a handful would know who had quietly approved every detail months earlier. Lily Richardson. Early Monday morning, Daniel Brooks appeared on the large monitor inside Lily's private study. Unlike ordinary video conferences, this meeting used an encrypted communication platform, accessible only to the company's highest executives. Daniel looked tired. "You've probably seen the latest reports?" "I have." Lily opened a folder already resting on her desk. "The venue inspection. Completed. The security review. Finished yesterday. The guest list." Daniel nodded. "Everyone has confirmed except one investment director from Boston." Lily reviewed another page. "Replace that seat with the president of the Fashion Preservation Foundation." "I've already contacted them." She smiled faintly. "I thought you might." Daniel hesitated before continuing. "There is one more matter." Lily looked up. "The legal department has recommended inviting the Chicago firm Richardson and Cole." She immediately recognized the name. Jack's law firm. Daniel continued carefully. "Their corporate practice has expanded significantly. Michael Hayes believes they may become useful for future acquisitions." Lily remained silent for several moments. Daniel knew her well enough not to interrupt. Finally, she spoke. "Has Michael completed his conflict review?" "He hasn't found any disqualifying issues." "Then extend the invitation." Daniel looked uncertain. "Are you sure?" "Business decisions shouldn't depend on my personal life." He lowered his eyes briefly. "I understand." The meeting continued for another 20 minutes. Store openings, supply chain updates, European trademark renewals, sustainability initiatives. When everything had been addressed, Daniel closed his notebook. "I'll see you in New York." Lily nodded. "Like always?" "No photographers, no interviews, no announcements." Daniel smiled. "The board still keeps your seat reserved." "I know." After the screen went dark, Lily remained seated for a while. She slowly closed the confidential folder. Then she looked toward the family photographs displayed across the bookshelf. One showed her standing beside Richard Richardson in an old design studio. She could not have been older than 12. Both of them were laughing. Neither was looking at the camera. She touched the frame gently. "I hope I'm still doing this your way." The house was quiet until shortly after 6 in the evening. Jack entered carrying an expensive bottle of wine. His excitement filled the hallway before he even removed his coat. "Lily, I'm in the kitchen." He walked in smiling broadly. "I've got incredible news." She looked up from preparing dinner. "What happened?" "Our managing partner just called." He placed his briefcase on the counter. "We've officially been invited to the Maison Étoile Gala." Lily acted surprised. "Congratulations." Jack laughed. "You don't understand how important this is." He poured himself a glass of water. "Half the executives I've wanted to meet for years will be there." "I'm happy for you." "This could change my career." He leaned against the counter. "If I make the right impression, we could land one of the biggest legal accounts in the country." Lily quietly set 2 plates on the dining table. "When is the event?" "Next Friday." He sat down. "There's just one complication." She already knew what he was about to say. "My invitation includes a guest." She waited. "I suppose that means you're coming." The sentence sounded less like an invitation than an obligation. "If you'd rather go alone..." "I can't." He interrupted immediately. "People expect married executives to bring their spouses." Lily nodded. "All right." Jack hesitated. But there are conditions. She looked at him calmly. What kind of conditions? He shifted awkwardly. You'll need something appropriate to wear. I have dresses. I mean something elegant. They're clean. They're not the point. He rubbed his forehead. This isn't an ordinary dinner. She remained quiet. Jack continued. Everyone there will be wearing couture. I understand. I don't want people thinking. He stopped himself. Thinking what? He looked away. Never mind. Lily waited. Eventually he sighed. I just don't want anyone judging us before I even introduce myself. There it was. Not cruel, not shouted, simply honest. More painful because of it. Lily lowered her eyes to her plate. I'll do my best. The conversation ended there, or at least Jack believed it had. Later that evening, while he watched financial news downstairs, Lily walked into the guest bedroom that had gradually become her dressing room. One side contained neatly arranged everyday clothing. The other held several garment bags that Jack had never opened. He assumed they contained old dresses that no longer fit. He had never asked. Lily carefully unzipped the first garment bag. Inside hung a midnight blue evening gown. Its silhouette was elegant, without trying to disguise the body wearing it. The fabric flowed naturally instead of clinging tightly. The neckline was graceful, the sleeves soft. Every seam reflected extraordinary craftsmanship. There was no visible logo. Only a tiny hand-stitched silver star hidden inside the collar. The private signature reserved for garments created personally by Lily. She ran her fingers lightly across the fabric. The dress had never been shown publicly. Months earlier, she had designed it herself after reviewing hundreds of customer letters from women who felt invisible because fashion rarely acknowledged bodies like theirs. She remembered writing a note beside the first sketch. Luxury should welcome people, not ask permission to deserve beauty. The gown had become her favorite design, not because it was expensive, because it expressed everything she believed. She carefully placed it back inside the garment bag. The following afternoon, Jack returned from work carrying several glossy fashion magazines. He spread them across the living room coffee table. Take a look. Lily joined him. He pointed toward photographs from previous Maison Étoile galas. See these women? She nodded. They understand elegance. They're beautiful. They're disciplined. They know presentation matters. Lily quietly turned another page. A famous actress appeared wearing one of Maison Étoile's iconic gowns. Jack admired the photograph. Incredible. It suits her. He looked toward Lily. You should wear darker colors. I usually do. And avoid anything fitted. Lily smiled gently. I know my body. Jack misunderstood the meaning behind her words. I just want you to feel comfortable. She looked at him for several seconds. So do I. Wednesday evening brought another encrypted board meeting. Daniel reported that every executive had arrived safely in New York. Sarah Bennett confirmed runway rehearsals. Michael Hayes finalized legal documentation for several confidential agreements that would be signed during Gala Week. Before ending the meeting, Daniel asked one final question. Will you stay at the penthouse as usual? Lily shook her head. No. The townhouse? No. Daniel looked puzzled. I'll stay at the hotel with Jack. The executives exchanged brief glances. Michael spoke first. You don't have to. I know. Sarah leaned forward. It may become uncomfortable. Lily smiled politely. Sometimes the truth needs enough room to reveal itself. No one argued. They had learned years ago that when Lily spoke quietly, her decision had already been made. Friday morning arrived beneath clear autumn skies. Jack carefully packed 2 tailored suits, 3 silk ties, Italian leather shoes polished until they reflected light, luxury cufflinks, a bottle of expensive cologne. Lily packed 1 small suitcase, a pair of comfortable shoes, her leather notebook, her encrypted laptop, and the midnight blue gown inside its protective garment bag. As Jack carried their luggage toward the car, he glanced at the garment bag resting beside the front door. "What's in there?" "My dress." He frowned slightly. "I hope it's not too noticeable." Lily lifted the bag without answering. Some questions she had learned revealed more about the person asking than any answer ever could. Neither of them realized that by the following evening, the dress hidden inside that simple garment bag would become the center of a moment neither marriage nor money could ever erase. New York welcomed them with the sharp confidence of early autumn. The skyline glittered beneath a cloudless afternoon sky as Jack guided the rental car through Midtown Manhattan. Every traffic light seemed to delay him, and every delay only increased his anticipation. He checked the dashboard clock repeatedly, rehearsing introductions in his mind before they had even reached the hotel. Lily sat quietly in the passenger seat. Her leather notebook rested inside her handbag. The midnight blue gown remained carefully protected in its garment bag across the back seat. She watched familiar streets pass by, the old stone buildings, the boutiques she had approved years earlier, the flagship Maison Étoile store on Fifth Avenue. Its elegant display windows now featured the newest campaign, a campaign she had personally reviewed 6 months before. Jack noticed the storefront and smiled. "There it is." Lily followed his gaze. "It looks beautiful." "It always does." His voice carried genuine admiration. "You know what amazes me?" "What?" "They never make mistakes." He laughed softly. "Every campaign is perfect." Lily looked out the window again. "No company is perfect. They're closer than anyone else." She didn't answer. The hotel hosting many of the gala's distinguished guests overlooked Central Park. Uniformed attendants welcomed arriving visitors while luxury vehicles lined the entrance one after another. Inside the marble lobby, conversations drifted through the air in English, French, Italian, and Japanese. Jack immediately recognized several well-known business leaders. He straightened his jacket. "This is exactly where we need to be." Lily simply smiled. At the reception desk, the concierge greeted them warmly. "Good afternoon, Mr. Richardson. Welcome." Jack looked pleasantly surprised. "They already know my name." The concierge smiled professionally. "We've been expecting all gala guests." Lily noticed another employee farther behind the desk. The young woman met Lily's eyes for only a second. Then, almost imperceptibly, she inclined her head. It was not the greeting given to a hotel guest. It was the greeting reserved for the owner of Maison Étoile. Lily returned only the slightest nod before following Jack toward the elevators. No words were exchanged. No explanation was needed. The discretion Richard Richardson had demanded years earlier still lived within every trusted partner of the company. Their suite overlooked the southern edge of Central Park. Jack immediately opened the curtains. What a view. "It is. We should get ready early." Lily unpacked quietly. Jack hung his navy tuxedo inside the wardrobe with remarkable care. Then he noticed Lily placing the garment bag inside another closet. "You still haven't shown me your dress." "You'll see it tonight." "I hope it's elegant." She smiled gently. "I think it is." He accepted the answer, though not enthusiastically. By 6 o'clock, the hotel lobby had transformed. Luxury cars arrived every few minutes. Guests wearing evening gowns and tailored tuxedos crossed the marble floor beneath glittering chandeliers. Fashion photographers waited outside behind velvet barriers. Jack adjusted his cufflinks one final time before looking toward Lily. She emerged from the bedroom. For several seconds, he simply stared. The midnight blue gown flowed gracefully around her figure. Instead of attempting to hide her curves, the dress celebrated them with quiet dignity. Its elegant draping created balance rather than concealment. The sleeves softened every movement. The deep blue fabric shimmered subtly beneath the room's warm lighting. Her hair had been gathered into a simple, sophisticated style. She wore almost no jewelry, only a pair of pearl earrings and her wedding ring. Lily looked calm, confident, beautiful. Jack's first reaction was surprise. His second was discomfort. He walked slowly around her. "It's different." Lily waited. "I've never seen that dress." "I've had it for a while." He frowned. "Where did you buy it?" "It was a gift." "A gift from who?" "A friend." Jack examined it more carefully. "There isn't any visible logo." "No," he sighed. "I suppose that's better." Lily looked at him quietly. "What do you mean?" "If people can't identify the designer, they won't compare it to the real Maison Étoile pieces." The words landed gently, but they still landed. Lily simply picked up her evening clutch. "I'm ready." Their car joined the long line approaching the gala venue. The event occupied the restored Grand Astoria Hall, one of Manhattan's most prestigious historic buildings. Television crews stood behind barricades. Fashion journalists interviewed celebrities as they walked the red carpet. Bright camera flashes illuminated the entrance every few seconds. Jack smiled confidently. "This is incredible." He exited the car first. A valet opened Lily's door. As she stepped onto the carpet, several photographers glanced briefly in her direction before focusing elsewhere. To them, she appeared to be another executive's spouse, exactly as Lily preferred. Inside the ballroom glowed beneath towering crystal chandeliers. Fresh white orchids decorated every table. A string quartet performed softly near the grand staircase. Waiters moved silently through the crowd, carrying silver trays. Jack immediately recognized several influential attorneys and investment executives. "Stay close," he told Lily. "I need to meet some people." "I'll be nearby." He nodded distractedly. Within minutes, he disappeared into a circle of business conversations. Lily remained alone beside one of the ballroom's tall windows. She watched guests arrive, observed their interactions, listened more than she spoke, exactly as she always had. Not far above the ballroom, behind discreet glass overlooking the event, 3 people quietly observed the gathering. Daniel Brooks, Sarah Bennett, Michael Hayes. Daniel noticed Lily immediately. "She made it," Sarah smiled, "and she's wearing it." Michael adjusted his glasses. "The blue gown," Daniel nodded. "I had hoped she would." Sarah looked toward the ballroom below. "She looks exactly like Richard used to describe." Michael smiled faintly. Someone who never needs attention to command respect. None of them moved. Tonight was not about revealing anything. It was about watching. Back downstairs, Jack approached Lily carrying 2 glasses of sparkling water. "I've spoken with 3 managing partners already." "That's wonderful. They're introducing me to several Maison Étoile executives later." "I'm glad." He studied her dress again. "Although," she looked up, "I still think you should have chosen something slimmer." Lily said nothing. Jack continued. "You're making yourself look larger than necessary." "I'm comfortable." He lowered his voice. "This isn't about comfort. It's about image." Nearby, two elegantly dressed women overheard part of the conversation. One glanced discreetly toward Lily. The other whispered something before covering a smile with her champagne glass. Jack noticed. Instead of defending his wife, he laughed awkwardly with them. "I've been trying to convince her all week." The women laughed politely, not loudly, just enough. Lily looked at neither of them. She simply thanked a passing waiter as he offered another glass of water. Several minutes later, the ballroom grew quieter. The evening's host announced that guests were welcome to mingle before dinner. People spread naturally across the room. Jack spotted a senior executive he desperately wanted to impress. "Come on, Lieutenant." He gently took Lily's arm. "I'll introduce you." The executive, accompanied by several investors, smiled courteously. "Good evening." Jack extended his hand. "Jack Richardson." Introductions followed. Business cards were exchanged. Conversation flowed easily until one investor complimented Jack's tuxedo. Without thinking, Jack laughed. "I wish I could say the same about my wife's fashion choices." Several people chuckled uncertainly. Jack kept going. "You know what's ironic?" He gestured lightly toward Lily's gown. "She insisted on wearing this to the biggest luxury fashion event of the year." The small circle grew noticeably quieter. Jack smiled, as though sharing a harmless joke. "I told her a body like hers wasn't exactly what Maison Étoile had in mind when they designed elegance." A few guests laughed. One woman looked uncomfortable. Another man stared into his wine glass. Lily remained completely still. Jack glanced at her. "Aren't you going to say something?" She met his eyes. "What would you like me to say?" He shrugged. "I don't know." "Neither do I." Her voice was calm, steady, without accusation, without embarrassment. That unexpected composure unsettled more people than anger ever could have. Above them, Daniel Brooks slowly placed his champagne glass onto a nearby table. Sarah Bennett's expression hardened. Michael Hayes quietly reached into his jacket. Without taking his eyes off the ballroom, he sent a single text message. "Preserve all ballroom camera recordings beginning at 7:42 p.m. No further explanation was necessary. The legal process had just quietly begun. Below, the orchestra resumed playing. Conversations gradually continued. Most guests moved on. Jack believed the awkward moment had already passed. Lily knew something entirely different. She had just watched her husband choose public humiliation over private respect. And somewhere inside the silent machinery of Maison Étoile, people who had spent decades protecting truth had begun preserving every second of what came next. The music resumed as though nothing unusual had happened. Violins floated softly across the ballroom, while waiters continued serving champagne with polished smiles. Crystal glasses clinked gently against silver trays. Laughter returned in scattered pockets throughout the hall. To most of the guests, Jack Richardson's remarks were simply another uncomfortable social moment that would soon be forgotten. To the leadership of Maison Étoile, they had become evidence. High above the ballroom, Daniel Brooks remained standing behind the observation glass. He had attended hundreds of corporate galas during his 23 years with the company. He had witnessed executives lose million-dollar contracts because of arrogance. He had watched celebrities destroy partnerships with a single careless sentence. But watching Lily endure humiliation without defending herself affected him in a way he had not expected. Sarah Bennett folded her arms. "I've seen enough." Daniel did not answer immediately. "So have I." Michael Hayes looked down at the ballroom while checking messages on his encrypted tablet. "Security has already isolated every camera angle covering the interaction." "Audio." They're retrieving recordings from the directional microphones installed for tonight's media production. Daniel nodded once. No edits. None. No summaries. Only original files. Michael looked up. Exactly as Miss Richardson always requires. That was another lesson Lily had inherited from her father. Evidence should never be improved, only preserved. Daniel quietly exhaled. Let's continue observing. Sarah looked toward him. You still think we shouldn't intervene? Daniel answered carefully. This is Lily's evening, not ours. If she wants this stopped, she'll let us know. Sarah already knew he was right. Lily had never used her authority to silence criticism. She believed character revealed itself most clearly when no one imagined that there would be consequences. Meanwhile, downstairs, Jack had completely regained his confidence. The awkwardness surrounding his joke had faded quickly enough that he interpreted the silence as acceptance rather than discomfort. He straightened his tuxedo jacket. I think that went well. Lily looked at him. Did it? They laughed. She held his gaze for a brief moment. Some of them did. Jack smiled. People appreciate honesty. Lily did not answer. She had learned long ago that correcting someone determined to misunderstand reality rarely accomplished anything. Instead, she quietly reached into her handbag. Her leather notebook appeared once again. Jack frowned. You're writing? For a moment. She wrote only one sentence. Public humiliation becomes easier for the person speaking than for the person remembering. Then she closed the notebook. Jack shook his head. You always write. It helps me think. I've never understood that notebook. You aren't supposed to. Before he could ask another question, a familiar voice interrupted. Mr. Richardson. Jack turned immediately. Standing before him was a distinguished man in his early 60s, with silver hair and impeccable posture. His tuxedo was elegant without appearing extravagant. A discreet Maison Étoile lapel pin rested against his jacket. Jack recognized him instantly. Daniel Brooks, the chief executive officer of Maison Étoile. Jack's entire posture changed. Mr. Brooks. Daniel smiled politely. I've heard good things about your firm's corporate practice. Thank you. It's an honor to meet you. Daniel extended his hand. Jack accepted eagerly. I hope you're enjoying the evening. Very much. Daniel's eyes briefly shifted toward Lily. His expression remained professionally neutral. Mrs. Richardson. Good evening, Daniel. The use of his first name almost escaped unnoticed. Almost. Jack looked briefly puzzled. You've met before, Lily answered naturally. Once. Daniel continued smoothly. Several years ago. At a charitable fundraising event. Jack immediately relaxed. Small world. Daniel smiled politely. It often is. Only 3 people in that conversation knew the explanation had been carefully chosen. They had indeed met years earlier, not at a charity event. But during Daniel's first board meeting after Richard Richardson's death, Lily had intentionally offered a harmless half-truth. Not a lie, simply not the entire story. Daniel turned back toward Jack. I understand your firm specializes in international corporate transactions. We do. I'd like to introduce you to our general counsel later. Jack's eyes brightened. I'd appreciate that very much. I'm sure you would. Daniel offered another courteous nod before excusing himself. As he walked away, Jack watched with obvious satisfaction. Did you hear that? I did. This is exactly why networking matters. I'm happy for you. Jack laughed. You see, I told you tonight could change everything. Lily looked across the ballroom toward Daniel, who was already speaking quietly with Sarah Bennett near the grand staircase. It probably will. Jack misunderstood the meaning entirely. A few minutes later, guests were invited into an adjoining reception hall before dinner. Large displays showcased selected Maison Étoile designs from previous decades. Each mannequin represented an iconic moment in the company's history. Jack admired every exhibit. Incredible craftsmanship. Lily walked slowly beside him. One gown displayed behind protective glass caused her footsteps to pause almost imperceptibly. It was an ivory evening dress from 12 years earlier. A small bronze plaque identified the piece. The Renewal Collection. Designer Confidential. Jack studied it admiringly. I've always loved this collection. Lily smiled softly. So have I. They say whoever designed it disappeared afterward. I've heard that. What a waste. Jack shook his head. Imagine creating something this beautiful and then walking away. Lily looked quietly at the dress. I don't think they walked away. What do you mean? Maybe they simply chose a different place to stand. Jack considered the answer strange. Before he could respond, another executive approached. Mr. Richardson. A woman in an elegant black evening gown extended her hand. Sarah Bennett. Jack immediately recognized her. Chief Operating Officer. It is truly a pleasure. Sarah smiled warmly. We've heard impressive things about your legal practice. Jack's confidence grew even stronger. I appreciate that. Sarah looked briefly toward Lily. Mrs. Richardson. Sarah. Again. Only first names. Again. Jack noticed. You two know each other as well, Sarah answered before Lily could. Our circles crossed during several philanthropic projects. Technically true. Lily had funded numerous charitable initiatives through anonymous foundations. Sarah had supervised many of them. No lies. Only carefully selected truths. And Sarah turned toward Jack. I hope you'll enjoy tomorrow morning's executive breakfast. I'm invited. Mr. Brooks insisted. Jack almost laughed with excitement. This is an incredible opportunity. It certainly is. Sarah smiled politely before leaving. Jack watched her disappear into the crowd. I can't believe this. Lily looked at him. What? Everything is falling into place. She quietly picked up a glass of sparkling water. Sometimes it does. Dinner was announced shortly afterward. Guests began finding their assigned tables. Jack searched eagerly for his name card. When he found it, his smile faded slightly. What is it? We're not near the front. Lily examined the seating arrangement. Their tables sat comfortably in the center of the ballroom, still prestigious, just not among the executive tables. Jack looked disappointed. I thought I'd be closer. Lily said gently, every seat lets you hear the speakers. That's not the point. She knew it wasn't. To Jack, proximity meant importance. Distance suggested status. As they approached their table, another unexpected detail caught his attention. The chair beside Lily's place setting remained empty. Its name card had been removed. Jack frowned. Someone's missing. Across the room, Daniel quietly noticed the same thing. Sarah stepped beside him. The board kept the seat open. Daniel nodded, as instructed. Neither explained further. The empty chair had not been forgotten. It had been intentionally reserved for someone whose place in the room had never depended on a printed name card. Back at the table, conversation flowed naturally among investors, museum directors, and fashion historians. One guest complimented Lily's elegant gown. It fits you beautifully. Before Lily could thank her, Jack laughed lightly. You should have seen the debate before we left Chicago. Several guests smiled politely. Jack continued. I kept telling her this dress wasn't exactly designed for... He stopped only because he noticed Lily quietly looking at him. She said nothing, not a word. Yet something in her calm expression caused him to leave the sentence unfinished. For the first time that evening, uncertainty flickered briefly across his face. He could not explain why. He only knew that each careless remark now seemed to echo a little longer than before. And somewhere beyond the ballroom lights, unseen preparations continued with quiet precision. The cameras kept recording. The legal department kept preserving evidence. The board kept watching, and Lily, as always, simply observed. Dinner progressed with the flawless precision that had become synonymous with Maison Étoile. Each course arrived exactly on schedule. The orchestra shifted seamlessly from classical arrangements to softer contemporary pieces. Servers moved almost invisibly between tables, refilling glasses before anyone needed to ask. Jack admired every detail. This, he whispered to Lily, is why they're the gold standard. Lily glanced around the ballroom. They pay attention. To everything. Jack smiled. Exactly. If only he had realized how true his own words were. Maison Étoile paid attention to everything, including him, including every sentence he had spoken since arriving, including every expression captured by cameras that he had never noticed. Across the room, Michael Hayes had temporarily stepped away from the executive table. He entered a private conference room adjoining the ballroom where two members of the legal compliance team were already waiting. Several large monitors displayed synchronized security footage from different areas of the venue. Michael reviewed timestamps carefully. Camera 12. The technician enlarged the image. Jack's earlier remarks appeared clearly. Camera 17. Another angle, this time showing the reactions of nearby guests. Audio. A second technician connected directional microphone recordings. Jack's voice filled the room. A body like hers wasn't exactly what Maison Étoile had in mind. Michael listened without interruption. When the recording ended, he spoke quietly. Archive everything. Already completed. No edits. Original files only. The originals have been duplicated onto secured servers. Michael nodded. What about witness identification? The technician displayed a seating chart. We've identified 12 guests within hearing distance. Any employees? 4. Good. Michael closed the folder. We may need statements later. Not because Jack had insulted Lily. People behaved badly every day. The legal concern was different. Jack hoped to become outside counsel for Maison Étoile. His public conduct toward another guest, especially one later revealed to be the company's owner, could become relevant when evaluating professional judgment, ethical standards, and suitability for representation. Evidence mattered. Assumptions did not. Back in the ballroom, Jack noticed Daniel Brooks speaking with several international investors. This is my chance. Lily looked up from her tea. To do what? Show them I understand the company. He stood confidently. I'll be right back. She nodded. I'll be here. Jack crossed the room with practiced confidence. Daniel welcomed him warmly. Mr. Richardson. I hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all. The group included a museum curator from Paris, an investment manager from Boston, and a luxury retail executive from California. Introductions were exchanged. Within minutes, the discussion turned toward Maison Étoile's history. Jack smiled. I've always admired the founder. Daniel listened. So have we. Richardson's vision was extraordinary. It certainly was. Jack continued enthusiastically. What impressed me most was his obsession with exclusivity. Daniel's expression remained polite. What do you mean? He understood luxury depends on limitation. Only certain people truly represent a premium brand. Several investors nodded thoughtfully. Jack felt encouraged. The company has always protected a very specific image. Daniel folded his hands calmly. And what image would that be? Jack answered without hesitation. Perfection. Daniel asked another question. How would you define perfection? Jack smiled. Discipline, refinement, elegance, and presentation. Daniel remained silent. Jack continued. Customers aspire to become worthy of brands like Maison Étoile. The Paris curator finally spoke. An interesting perspective. Jack nodded confidently. It's the foundation of luxury. Daniel thanked him politely. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. The conversation moved naturally toward another topic. Jack walked away feeling pleased with himself. He never noticed that none of the executives had actually agreed with his conclusions. From across the ballroom, Lily had observed the entire exchange. Not every word, only enough to recognize the direction of the conversation. A waiter approached. Mrs. Richardson. He placed a sealed envelope discreetly beside her plate. No sender, the waiter smiled. It was requested that only you receive it. After he left, Lily quietly opened the envelope. Inside rested a single folded sheet, handwritten. From Daniel, meeting room 4. 20 minutes, only if necessary. Lily read the message once before folding it again. She slipped it inside her notebook. Then she resumed drinking her tea as though nothing had happened. 20 minutes later, the ballroom transitioned into an exhibition period before the evening presentation. Guests wandered through displays showcasing archival sketches, historical garments, and behind-the-scenes photography documenting Maison Étoile's creative process. Jack eagerly examined each exhibit. One display particularly caught his attention. Several original design sketches had been framed beneath museum-quality glass. The artist's signature had been carefully removed. Jack admired the drawings. The designer was brilliant. A nearby fashion historian smiled. Many people think so. It's a shame nobody knows who created these. The historian looked thoughtfully at the sketches. Sometimes anonymity protects the work better than fame. Jack laughed. I'd rather have the fame. The historian smiled politely. I'm not surprised. Lily quietly continued walking. She recognized every sketch immediately. She had drawn them 20 years earlier, while sitting beside her father inside the old Manhattan studio. She still remembered spilling coffee on one corner of the original paper. The tiny stain remained visible beneath the glass. She smiled, almost imperceptibly. Memory lived in the smallest details. As she continued through the exhibition, another familiar voice greeted her softly. Lily. She turned. Michael Hayes stood a respectful distance away. No handshake, no public acknowledgement beyond what any acquaintance might exchange. Good evening. I hope I'm not disturbing you. Not at all. Michael lowered his voice. We've completed the preliminary review. She understood immediately. And there may be an issue. What kind? Michael handed her a slim confidential folder. Inside rested copies of publicly available legal filings. Lily scanned the first page. The name immediately caught her attention. Hamilton Biotech Holdings. She turned another page. Lead counsel Richardson and Cole, representing attorney Jack Richardson. Lily continued reading silently. Hamilton Biotech had recently acquired a textile technology company. Ordinarily, that would have meant nothing, except Maison Étoile had spent nearly a year negotiating exclusive licensing rights to the same patented manufacturing process. The negotiations remained confidential. Michael spoke carefully. "We don't yet know whether Mr. Richardson had access to sensitive information." Lily looked up. "Has he violated any laws?" "Not that we've found." "Any ethical rules?" "Still under review." She closed the folder. "Continue investigating." "No assumptions. Only evidence." Michael nodded. "As always. If everything is proper, we'll proceed normally." "And if it isn't?" Lily answered calmly. "The rules should apply equally." Michael looked at her for a moment. Even now, she understood his meaning. Even after tonight, even after the humiliation. Especially now. He smiled slightly. Richard Richardson had once said almost exactly the same sentence. Michael quietly excused himself. Lily returned the folder to her handbag. Not once had she considered using her position against Jack. If consequences eventually came, they would come because of facts, never because of wounded pride. Later that evening, the ballroom lights dimmed for a short presentation celebrating Maison Étoile's charitable foundation. Large screens displayed photographs of scholarships, vocational training centers, and grants supporting young designers from disadvantaged communities. The narrator concluded with one sentence: "Every act of beauty begins with respect." The audience applauded warmly. Jack leaned towards Lily. "Excellent branding." She looked at the screen. Perhaps. It's good marketing. Or maybe it's what they believe. He shrugged. In business, there's usually no difference. Lily remained silent. For her, there was every difference. As the presentation ended, Daniel Brooks returned to the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, tomorrow morning, several invited guests will participate in a private executive breakfast before our legal and strategic sessions." Jack straightened immediately. Daniel continued. "We look forward to thoughtful discussions about the future of Maison Étoile." Applause filled the ballroom. Jack whispered excitedly, "I told you." "You did. This is the opportunity I've waited years for." Lily smiled gently. "I hope you make the most of it." "I will." He had no idea how true those words would become. Because tomorrow morning, for the first time, Jack Richardson would walk into a room where every person already knew far more about him than he knew about any of them. And by the time that meeting ended, the distance between appearance and truth would begin narrowing in ways he could no longer control. Morning sunlight spilled across Manhattan long before most of the gala guests awoke. From the windows of the hotel overlooking Central Park, the city looked peaceful, almost detached from the ambitions that filled its boardrooms every day. Jack Richardson had been awake since 6. His navy suit hung neatly pressed near the window. His shoes had already been polished again. He reviewed notes on Maison Étoile while drinking black coffee highlighting names, recent acquisitions, and legal precedents that he believed might impress the company's executives. Today mattered. The executive breakfast was not merely another networking event. It was an invitation reserved for people Maison Étoile considered worth knowing better. Jack intended to ensure they remembered him. Across the suite, Lily had already finished answering several encrypted emails before sunrise. One message came from Daniel Brooks. "Executive breakfast begins at 8:30. Board meeting at 11:00. Please continue as planned." Another arrived from Michael Hayes. "Conflict review remains ongoing. Additional documentation expected before noon." Lily replied with only 4 words. Proceed with standard procedure. No special instructions, no emotional comments, no mention of Jack. When she closed her laptop, she slipped it back into her bag beside the familiar leather notebook. She glanced briefly at the Manhattan skyline. Her father had once told her that leadership meant making difficult decisions before anyone else even realized they existed. This morning, she hoped no difficult decision would become necessary. At precisely 8:15, Jack and Lily entered the hotel's private dining room. Only 30 guests had been invited. The atmosphere differed completely from the previous night's gala. No orchestra, no flashing cameras, no celebrities. Only polished wood tables, quiet conversations, and executives who preferred substance over spectacle. Daniel Brooks greeted guests personally at the entrance. When Jack approached, Daniel smiled warmly. "Good morning, Mr. Richardson." "Good morning. We're pleased you could join us." "The pleasure is mine." Daniel turned politely toward Lily. "Mrs. Richardson." "Good morning, Daniel." Again. Only first names, Jack noticed. Again. He smiled awkwardly. "You two certainly seem comfortable with each other." Daniel answered smoothly. "My wife and Mrs. Richardson have supported the same literacy foundation for years." Another carefully chosen truth. Lily simply smiled. No further explanation was offered. Guests gradually took their seats. Jack found himself seated beside an executive from London and across from a prominent venture capitalist. Lily's assigned seat was farther down the table beside Sarah Bennett. Jack assumed it was coincidence. In reality, Sarah had personally arranged the seating chart before sunrise. Breakfast began with informal conversation. Topics shifted naturally from international markets to supply chain resilience, sustainable textiles, and emerging consumer expectations. Jack contributed confidently. He quoted financial statistics, referenced legal trends, explained regulatory changes affecting luxury brands. Several executives nodded politely. He knew his profession well. No one questioned that. Then the discussion turned toward branding. Daniel Brooks looked around the room. "I'd like everyone's perspective. What distinguishes a luxury brand from an expensive one?" Several guests offered thoughtful answers. Craftsmanship, history, trust, consistency. When Daniel finally looked toward Jack, he smiled. "Mr. Richardson," Jack welcomed the opportunity. "In my opinion, exclusivity." Daniel nodded. "Could you elaborate?" "The fewer people who truly represent a brand, the stronger its identity becomes." Several people listened carefully. Jack continued. "Luxury should inspire aspiration. It isn't meant for everyone." Sarah Bennett quietly folded her napkin. Daniel remained expressionless. Jack felt encouraged. The danger comes when brands try too hard to become inclusive. They risk losing prestige. The venture capitalist asked, "So who shouldn't represent luxury?" Jack answered almost immediately, "People who contradict the image." Someone else asked, "What image?" Jack smiled. "Confidence, discipline, physical excellence." The room grew noticeably quieter. Sarah glanced briefly towards Lily. Lily calmly sipped her tea. Daniel asked another question. "What role does authenticity play?" Jack answered confidently. "Authenticity matters, but perception matters more." No one interrupted him. Jack continued. "If customers see someone who doesn't fit the ideal, the emotional value of the brand declines." Silence followed. Not hostile, simply thoughtful. Final and finally, Daniel thanked him. "I appreciate your perspective." Breakfast continued. No debate, no criticism. Jack interpreted the lack of disagreement as approval. Lily recognized something entirely different. The executives were listening, not because they agreed, because they were learning. After breakfast concluded, guests divided into smaller discussion groups throughout the conference center. Jack eagerly joined a conversation involving corporate partnerships and future legal strategy. Lily excused herself briefly. She entered a quiet executive lounge where Daniel, Sarah, and Michael were already waiting. The door closed softly behind her. Daniel spoke first. "You heard everything." "I did." Sarah looked troubled. "He genuinely believes those things." Lily nodded. "Yes." Michael opened a confidential folder. "Our investigation uncovered additional information." He placed several documents on the table. Hamilton Biotech, patent negotiations, corporate filings, conflict disclosure reports. Michael summarized carefully. "So far, we've found no evidence of misconduct." Lily looked relieved. "And there is, however, another concern." "What concern?" Michael slid forward another document. "This morning before breakfast, Mr. Richardson distributed promotional material for his law firm." Lily reviewed the document. It contained Richardson and Cole's corporate services brochure. Nothing unusual. Michael continued. "He presented it as legal expertise, tailored specifically for Maison Étoile." Daniel added quietly, "while repeatedly describing the company's values in ways that fundamentally contradict our published mission." Sarah folded her hands. "Our archives contain decades of statements from Richard." She looked toward Lily. "He always insisted luxury begins with human dignity." Lily remained silent. Daniel finally asked, "Would you like us to end today's discussions?" She answered without hesitation, "No." Michael looked surprised. "You're certain?" "Very." "If someone reveals who they are voluntarily—" She closed the folder gently. "We shouldn't interrupt." The executives exchanged quiet glances. None of them argued. Lily returned to the conference hall. By early afternoon, guests were invited into Maison Étoile's Innovation Gallery. Interactive displays demonstrated new sustainable fabrics and advanced tailoring techniques. Designers answered questions. Researchers explained textile engineering. Jack moved confidently between exhibits, clearly enjoying the attention. At one display featuring adaptive fashion technology, a young designer described garments created specifically to accommodate different body types without sacrificing elegance. Jack smiled politely. "It's admirable." Then he added, "Though I still think luxury should maintain certain standards." The young designer looked puzzled. "What standards?" Jack gestured vaguely. "The traditional image." "You mean thin models?" Jack shrugged. "They sell." Several nearby guests turned toward the conversation. The designer replied respectfully, "Our customer research suggests otherwise." Jack laughed. "Research doesn't always beat aspiration." He glanced toward Lily, who had quietly approached the exhibit. "Right, Lily." She looked at him calmly. "What do you mean?" "You've always preferred comfortable clothing." "I prefer clothing that respects people." Jack chuckled. "I suppose that's one way to describe it." Then, without realizing how many people were listening, he added, "If Maison Étoile starts designing for everybody's shape, it won't stay luxurious for long." Silence spread across the exhibit. The young designer lowered her eyes. One elderly museum curator frowned slightly. A journalist quietly typed something into his phone. Lily simply thanked the designer for the presentation. It was beautifully explained. The young woman smiled gratefully. "Thank you." Jack shook his head as they walked away. "You don't have to encourage everything." Lily looked at him. Why not? Because not every idea deserves success. She answered softly, sometimes success begins because someone was respected before they were judged. Jack barely heard the sentence. His attention had already shifted toward another executive entering the gallery. Behind a nearby display, Daniel Brooks had witnessed the entire exchange. He turned quietly toward Michael Hayes. No more observation. Michael understood immediately. The board. Daniel nodded once. It's time. Within minutes, encrypted notifications were sent to every voting member of Maison Étoile's executive board. Emergency session. Attendance required. 1 hour. Confidential. No explanation appeared in the message. None was necessary. The decision everyone had hoped to postpone could no longer wait. Not because Jack had insulted Lily once again, but because he had publicly demonstrated that he fundamentally misunderstood the very values of the company he was asking to represent. And in a luxury house built upon quiet dignity rather than perfect appearances, that misunderstanding had become far more significant than any legal resume could overcome. At 1 o'clock that afternoon, while most of the invited guests enjoyed private showroom tours or attended networking sessions, a different gathering quietly assembled 6 floors above the conference center. The boardroom of Maison Étoile was sealed. Security personnel verified every identity before allowing entry. Mobile phones remained outside. Every participant signed the attendance register. The atmosphere carried none of the glamour visible downstairs. There were no cameras, no flowers, no music. Only polished walnut tables, leather chairs, and decades of corporate responsibility resting silently between them. One by one, the board members arrived. Daniel Brooks entered first. Sarah Bennett followed with several thick binders. Chief Financial Officer Thomas Green carried financial reports. Michael Hayes placed 2 locked document cases on the conference table. 3 independent directors joined moments later. Each had served Maison Étoile for more than 15 years. Finally, the last person entered the room. Lily Richardson. She wore the same elegant navy dress from the gala. No one stood because she demanded respect. They stood because they believed she had earned it. "Good afternoon," Lily said softly. Every person greeted her in return. Daniel waited until everyone was seated. "The meeting is officially in session." Michael activated the encrypted recording system required for formal board proceedings. The small red light illuminated. Every word spoken from that moment forward would become part of the company's permanent legal record. Daniel looked toward Lily. "Would you like to begin?" She shook her head gently. "No, you should. Present the facts first." Daniel smiled, almost imperceptibly. She had answered exactly as her father always had. Facts before conclusions. Michael opened the first document case. "Our agenda contains 2 separate matters. The first concerns tomorrow's legal partnership review. The second concerns newly collected information relevant to candidate evaluation." He deliberately avoided mentioning Jack by name. Not yet. Thomas Green distributed financial summaries to every board member. "Our acquisition strategy for the coming fiscal year depends heavily on selecting outside legal counsel capable of managing international intellectual property licensing and cross-border litigation." One director nodded. "The decision will influence every expansion planned for Europe." Another added, "We cannot afford a mistake." Michael continued, "Candidate evaluations have been underway for 6 months. Richardson and Cole remained among the strongest finalists." Lily quietly reviewed the summary before her. She already knew most of the contents: revenue growth, trial experience, international partnerships, professional reputation. On paper, Jack's firm appeared highly qualified. Daniel folded his hands. Until yesterday. Silence settled over the room. Michael unlocked the second document case. This file contains observations gathered during the gala and today's executive sessions. He carefully emphasized one sentence. None of the material has been interpreted, only preserved. Lily appreciated that distinction. Interpretation belonged to the board. Evidence belonged to the record. The first monitor displayed ballroom security footage. No sound, only images. Jack laughing. Guests turning. Lily standing quietly. Another camera angle. Another. No dramatic editing. No emotional music. Only reality. Michael then activated synchronized audio. Jack's own voice filled the room. Hey, a body like hers wasn't exactly what Maison Étoile had in mind. Silence followed the recording. Not because anyone felt shocked. Most of them had witnessed it in person. The silence existed because hearing the words again carried a different weight inside a boardroom than inside a ballroom. One independent director quietly removed his glasses. Another slowly closed his notebook. Daniel spoke calmly. Continue. Michael displayed footage from the executive breakfast, Jack discussing exclusivity, physical appearance, brand identity, the innovation gallery, his comments regarding body image, his dismissal of adaptive fashion, his repeated insistence that luxury belonged only to certain kinds of people. Again, no commentary accompanied the recordings, only original footage. When everything had been presented, Michael switched off the monitors. No further recordings remain. Daniel looked around the room. Questions. One director spoke first. Has Mr. Richardson violated any law? Michael answered immediately. No. Another asked, any breach of professional ethics confirmed? None. Thomas Green leaned forward. So why are we discussing this? Daniel looked toward Lily before answering. Because outside counsel does more than interpret contracts. They represent Maison Étoile. Our values become associated with their judgment. Sarah Bennett quietly opened another folder. Our brand statement has remained unchanged for 27 years. She read the opening sentence aloud. Luxury begins when every person is treated with dignity. The room remained quiet. Sarah continued. Every employee receives this statement. Every executive signs acknowledgement. Our retail training begins with it. She closed the folder. The question before the board is simple. Can someone who publicly rejects that principle credibly represent this company? No one answered immediately. Not because the answer was difficult, because every director understood the importance of separating emotion from governance. Lily continued reviewing documents. Her expression never changed. One board member finally looked toward her. Miss Richardson. She raised her eyes. You've remained silent. I've listened. Would you like to share your opinion? She placed her pen beside the folder. My opinion should not come first. Another director smiled gently. You're the owner. I'm also his wife. The room became even quieter. That creates responsibility, not privilege. Michael watched her carefully. She continued. If I speak before everyone else, you may unconsciously agree with me. I don't want that. Daniel nodded respectfully. Then we'll proceed individually. Each director spoke in turn. The first focused on corporate reputation. The second discussed cultural alignment. The third emphasized leadership philosophy. Thomas Green analyzed long-term investor confidence. Sarah reflected on employee morale. Michael summarized legal considerations. Remarkably, none of them based their conclusions upon Jack insulting Lily personally. Instead, they returned repeatedly to one issue: representation. Could someone who believed appearance determined human worth accurately defend a company whose founder had built it upon the opposite belief? After nearly 40 minutes, Daniel finally looked back toward Lily. "The discussion is complete." She nodded once. "May I ask one question?" "Of course." She looked toward Michael. "Have we contacted Richardson and Cole regarding the intellectual property review?" "Yes." "Any irregularities?" "None." "So their legal work remains professional," Michael answered honestly. "Yes." Lily leaned back slightly. "Then today's recommendation should concern only representation, no assumptions beyond verified facts." Daniel smiled. As expected. Another director asked, "What would you recommend?" Lily remained silent for several seconds. When she finally spoke, her voice was almost gentle. "Invite Mr. Richardson to tomorrow's final presentation." Several people looked surprised. Sarah frowned slightly. "Even now?" "Yes." Daniel understood immediately. "You want him evaluated fairly." "I want him evaluated completely." Michael nodded. "There are still documents he hasn't seen." Lily looked toward him. "There are documents everyone should see." The board unanimously approved the recommendation. Tomorrow morning's final selection meeting would proceed exactly as scheduled. Jack Richardson would present his legal strategy before the executive committee. Nothing would be canceled. Nothing would be hidden. Nothing would be manipulated. Daniel officially closed the meeting. As directors quietly gathered their papers, Sarah remained behind with Lily. "May I ask something?" "Of course." Sarah hesitated. "Does this hurt?" Lily looked toward the Manhattan skyline beyond the conference room windows. "Yes," Sarah waited, "but not because he laughed at me." She gently touched the leather notebook resting beside her. "It hurts because he truly believes people deserve less respect when they don't fit his idea of beauty." She looked down at the city below. "My father spent his entire life building a company to prove the opposite." Sarah quietly reached across the table and placed her hand over Lily's. "I'm sorry." Lily smiled faintly. "So is he." Sarah looked confused. "Jack," Lily nodded. "He just doesn't know it yet." An hour later, while the board meeting concluded upstairs, Jack sat comfortably in the hotel lounge speaking with two attorneys from another New York firm. He laughed confidently, shared business stories, accepted congratulations for having reached Maison Étoile's final evaluation stage. One lawyer smiled. "Looks like tomorrow will be your day." Jack lifted his coffee cup. "I certainly hope so." Across town, encrypted emails quietly left Maison Étoile's legal department. Meeting confirmation, presentation schedule, supporting documentation, attendance list. One recipient smiled calmly after reading it. Jack Richardson. He believed the message represented the beginning of the greatest opportunity of his career. He did not yet realize it would instead become the moment when every assumption he had built about success, appearance, and even his own marriage would begin collapsing beneath the undeniable weight of documented truth. The following morning arrived with the quiet certainty that often preceded life-changing moments. Jack Richardson stood before the mirror in the hotel suite, adjusting the cuffs of his charcoal gray suit for the third time. His tie was perfectly centered. His shoes reflected the morning sunlight streaming through the windows. He looked exactly like the attorney he wanted Maison Étoile to remember. Behind him, Lily finished buttoning a simple cream-colored coat over a modest navy dress. She wore no statement jewelry, no designer handbag with visible logos, no symbols of wealth. only her wedding ring. For a little while longer. Jack smiled confidently. Wish me luck. Lily looked at him with the same calm expression she had worn throughout the trip. I hope today goes well. I've prepared for years. I know. I don't think I've ever been this ready. She nodded gently. Preparation matters. He laughed. That's one thing we've always agreed on. Lily quietly picked up her leather notebook. So does character. Jack barely heard the last sentence. His thoughts had already moved ahead to conference rooms, presentations, and future contracts. The executive meeting occupied the top floor of Maison Étoile's Manhattan headquarters. Unlike the glamorous gala venue, the headquarters reflected restrained confidence. Natural stone, warm wood, soft lighting. Every design choice emphasized craftsmanship rather than extravagance. Jack admired the architecture as he entered. This building says everything about the company. Lily looked around the familiar lobby. It does. Reception staff welcomed arriving guests. Again, several employees greeted Lily with subtle nods, almost too discreet for outsiders to notice. Jack remained unaware. To him, they appeared to be exceptionally polite professionals. The executive assistant approached. Mr. Richardson? Yes. Your presentation begins in 15 minutes. She handed him a visitor badge. Mrs. Richardson, we've prepared a waiting lounge. Should you prefer somewhere comfortable? Before Lily could answer, Jack smiled. She'll probably be more comfortable there. Lily simply nodded. Thank you. The assistant led Jack toward the executive conference center. Another employee quietly escorted Lily in a different direction. Neither path was accidental. The waiting lounge overlooked an interior courtyard filled with white orchids. As soon as the door closed, Daniel Brooks entered through a private entrance. Good morning. Good morning. Daniel smiled. You slept well? Enough. He noticed the notebook resting beside her. You brought it. I always do. Daniel sat across from her. The board has completed every document. Michael will arrive shortly. Lily looked toward the window. How is Jack? Confident. She smiled faintly. He usually is. Daniel hesitated. There is still time. For what? To postpone the announcement. Lily shook her head. No. We've postponed it for 6 years already. Daniel nodded. I thought you'd say that. At precisely 9 o'clock, Jack entered the executive conference room. The room immediately impressed him. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Manhattan. A long walnut table occupied the center. Large digital displays covered one wall. Seated around the table were Daniel Brooks, Sarah Bennett, Michael Hayes, Thomas Green, and several independent directors. Jack recognized nearly everyone. He greeted each confidently. Good morning. Daniel welcomed him warmly. Thank you for joining us. It's an honor. The atmosphere remained courteous, professional, not intimidating. Daniel began. Mr. Richardson, we'd like to hear your thoughts regarding Maison Étoile's future legal strategy. Jack stood confidently beside the presentation screen. His opening remarks were polished. He discussed international trademark enforcement, counterfeit prevention, cross-border acquisitions, digital intellectual property. His legal analysis was impressive. Board members asked thoughtful questions. Jack answered each clearly. For nearly 40 minutes, everything proceeded almost perfectly. Even Michael Hayes privately acknowledged that Jack possessed genuine legal ability. Finally, Daniel closed the presentation folder. Thank you. Jack smiled. My pleasure. I appreciate the opportunity. Daniel folded his hands. We have several additional questions. Of course. Sarah Bennett spoke first. You've said that legal representation requires protecting a company's identity. I believe that strongly. What defines Maison Étoile's identity? Jack answered confidently. Excellence. Prestige. Exclusivity. Daniel nodded. And Jack paused. Innovation. Craftsmanship. Michael Hayes looked toward him. Anything else? Jack considered the question. I think that covers the essentials. Michael quietly opened a thin folder. It covers some of them. Jack remained confident. Michael continued. Our founder often described the company differently. Jack smiled politely. I'm familiar with many of his interviews. Michael returned the smile. So are we. Daniel pressed a small button. The large presentation screen behind Jack illuminated. The company mission statement appeared. Luxury begins when every person is treated with dignity. Jack read it. He nodded. A powerful message. Daniel asked calmly, "What does that sentence mean to you?" Jack answered after a moment. It means customers deserve respect. Daniel tilted his head slightly. Only customers. Jack hesitated. No. Employees as well. Sarah asked another question. Anyone else? Jack looked uncertain. I suppose business partners. Michael quietly closed his folder. No further additions? Jack shook his head. Daniel remained silent for several seconds. Then he spoke. We'd like to show you something. He pressed another button. The screen changed. Surveillance footage appeared. Jack immediately recognized the ballroom from 2 nights earlier. His smile faded slightly. What is this? No one answered. The video played. There he was, laughing, pointing toward Lily, gesturing toward her dress, guests turning to watch. The recording ended. Another angle began, then another. Jack shifted uncomfortably. Michael activated synchronized audio. His own voice echoed throughout the conference room. A body like hers wasn't exactly what Maison Étoile had in mind. Silence. Another recording followed. The executive breakfast. His comments about exclusivity. His belief that perception mattered more than authenticity. Then the innovation gallery. If Maison Étoile starts designing for everybody's shape, it won't stay luxurious for long. The room fell completely silent after the final recording ended. Jack looked around the table. I can explain. Daniel answered calmly. We'd like you to. Jack cleared his throat. Those comments were taken out of context. Michael looked toward the technicians. Were any recordings edited? No. Any missing segments? No. Michael turned back toward Jack. They're complete. Jack swallowed. I wasn't trying to insult the company. Sarah asked gently, were you trying to insult your wife? Jack immediately shook his head. No. I was joking. Daniel asked quietly, did she laugh? Jack had no answer. The silence grew heavier. Michael opened another folder. During breakfast yesterday, you stated that luxury should not represent everybody type. Jack looked embarrassed. I was discussing branding. Michael nodded. You were. He placed several printed documents before Jack. Our founder's private design philosophy. Jack glanced at the pages. Richard Richardson's handwriting filled the first document. Beauty is never reserved for the fortunate. Luxury fails the moment it teaches someone they must earn the right to feel worthy. Jack continued reading. His expression slowly changed. Daniel watched him carefully. Our founder repeated those principles for over 30 years. Sarah added softly. They remain the foundation of every decision this company makes. Jack looked genuinely shaken. I didn't know. Michael answered calmly. No, you didn't. Daniel leaned forward slightly. Mr. Richardson, for one final matter. He looked toward the conference room door. Would you please invite our final participant? The executive assistant nodded and quietly left the room. Jack frowned. I thought everyone was already here. Daniel simply replied, not yet. A few moments later, footsteps echoed softly beyond the conference room. The door handle turned. Every board member stood. Not hurriedly, not dramatically, simply out of long-established respect. Only Jack remained seated, confused, watching, still believing another executive was about to enter. He had absolutely no idea that the next person to walk through that door would transform every memory of the past 6 years into something he had never imagined possible. The conference room remained perfectly still. Jack noticed every board member rise to their feet at the same moment. Daniel Brooks, Sarah Bennett, Thomas Green, Michael Hayes. Even the independent directors, individuals whose reputations had been built over decades in finance law and international business, stood without hesitation. No one spoke. No one looked toward Jack. Every pair of eyes turned toward the conference room door. Jack instinctively stood as well. He assumed someone extraordinary was about to enter. Perhaps a member of the Richardson family. Perhaps an international investor. Perhaps the mysterious owner whose identity had remained hidden from the fashion world for so many years. The door opened quietly. Lily Richardson walked inside. She wore the same simple navy dress, the same cream-colored coat folded neatly over one arm, the same calm expression she had worn throughout the trip. Nothing about her appearance suggested wealth, nothing announced power. Yet every executive in the room greeted her with unmistakable respect. Good morning, Miss Richardson. Daniel Brooks was the first to speak. His voice carried neither surprise nor ceremony, only the natural tone of someone welcoming a leader. Lily smiled gently. Good morning, everyone. Sarah Bennett stepped forward first. It's good to see you. You too, Sarah. Thomas Green nodded respectfully. Everything is prepared. Thank you. Michael Hayes placed one hand over a thick leather portfolio. We're ready whenever you are. Jack remained frozen. His eyes moved from one face to another, then back to Lily. Finally, he forced himself to speak. Lily? She turned toward him. Yes. What is this? For the first time since entering the room, silence seemed almost audible. Daniel looked toward Lily. Would you prefer that I continue? She gave a small nod. Please. Daniel walked calmly to the head of the conference table. The company's seal was engraved into the polished wood before him. He rested both hands lightly on the surface. Mr. Richardson, before this meeting proceeds any further, there is information you, and until today, the public have not known. Jack's heartbeat seemed louder than the room itself. Daniel continued. For the past 6 years, Maison Étoile has operated under a governance structure established by our founder, Richard Richardson. Michael opened a leather folder. Inside rested several original legal documents protected beneath archival sleeves. Daniel spoke slowly. According to Richard Richardson's last will and testament, all controlling ownership of Maison Étoile transferred to one individual. Michael carefully removed the first document. The will was executed in accordance with New York law. He placed it before Jack. Jack barely glanced at the pages. His attention remained fixed on Lily. Daniel continued. The ownership structure has remained confidential by explicit instruction of the founder. Sarah Bennett quietly added, "Every executive seated in this room signed permanent confidentiality agreements 6 years ago." Thomas Green placed another document on the table. The voting share register. Michael followed with another. The controlling equity certificate. Another. The intellectual property assignment. Then another. The board ratification. Every document carried the same name, Lily Richardson. Jack stared. He blinked once, then again. His lips moved without producing words. Michael calmly slid forward one final document. Corporate ownership confirmation. Jack finally lowered his eyes. His own hands began trembling. Every signature, every certification, every official seal, every legal filing, all authentic, all undeniable. Slowly, almost mechanically, he looked back towards Lily. "No." His voice barely emerged. "No." Daniel answered quietly. "Yes." Jack laughed once. A short, nervous sound completely unlike the confident laugh everyone had heard during the gala. There has to be some mistake." Michael answered immediately. "There isn't." Jack looked desperately from one executive to another. No one smiled. No one appeared triumphant. No one looked interested in humiliating him. They simply waited. The truth required no performance. Jack turned back toward Lily. "You," his voice cracked, "you own..." Lily met his eyes. "Yes." "The entire company?" "Yes." "The whole time?" She nodded once. "The whole time." The conference room remained silent. Outside the windows, Manhattan continued its ordinary morning. Traffic flowed. People hurried to work. Construction cranes moved across the skyline. The city had no idea that inside one quiet boardroom, an entire marriage had just changed forever. Jack lowered himself slowly into his chair. His breathing became uneven. "I don't understand." Lily remained standing. "I know. You never asked." The words were not spoken with bitterness, only honesty. Jack looked at her in disbelief. "Why didn't you tell me?" She considered the question carefully. "At first, because I wanted someone to know me before they knew my last name." Jack closed his eyes briefly. "And later?" She answered almost immediately. "Because by then, I wanted to know whether you still saw me." No one moved. No one interrupted. Daniel quietly stepped back, allowing the conversation to become personal. Jack rubbed both hands across his face. "I loved you." Lily's expression softened. "I believe you did." His eyes filled with confusion. "Believe?" She nodded gently. "I believe you loved the woman you met. The woman who laughed easily. The woman who walked 5 miles every Saturday. The woman who fit into the dresses you admired." Jack lowered his eyes. Lily continued. "But when my body changed, you slowly stopped seeing me." Her voice remained calm, never louder than conversation. "You saw weight. You saw embarrassment. You saw inconvenience." She placed her notebook quietly on the conference table. "I was still here." Jack looked at the notebook. For years he had dismissed it as an odd habit. Nothing more. Lily slowly opened it. Hundreds of handwritten pages filled the worn leather binding. Small dates, short observations, simple facts. She turned to one page. March 14th. She read quietly. "Jack apologized to a waiter because he thought my dessert made our table look unhealthy." Another page. August 2nd. "Jack introduced every guest at dinner except me." Another. November 18th. Jack suggested I stay in the hotel during his firm's holiday gala because photographs might affect his reputation. Another. February 9th. Jack asked whether I had considered surgery before attending his partner's wedding. The room remained completely silent. Lily closed the notebook again. I never wrote these because I wanted revenge. She rested one hand gently on the cover. I wrote them because I was afraid one day I'd convince myself they hadn't happened. Jack stared at the notebook. His own memories returned one after another. Comments spoken carelessly, jokes, excuses, embarrassed glances, every small wound he had treated as insignificant. None had disappeared. Lily had simply carried them quietly. Michael Hayes finally broke the silence. Mr. Richardson. Jack looked toward him. You told us yesterday that perception matters more than authenticity. Jack said nothing. Michael continued. Richard Richardson believed the opposite. He opened another folder. Inside rested an old handwritten letter. Our founder wrote this shortly before his death. He handed the letter to Jack. Jack read the first lines. If the people leading this company ever begin believing that beauty belongs only to the fortunate, then everything I built deserves to disappear. His hands shook even harder. Daniel spoke gently. The gown Mrs. Richardson wore at the gala. Jack looked up. On the one you mocked, Sarah Bennett finished the sentence, was designed by Lily herself. Jack stared at Lily. She nodded once. It wasn't part of this season's collection. I created it privately. For women who have spent years believing luxury had forgotten them. Jack remembered his own words. A body like yours isn't what Maison Étoile had in mind. The sentence echoed inside his mind with unbearable clarity. He had mocked the designer. He had insulted the owner. More than that, he had ridiculed the very philosophy upon which the company had been built. And he had done it while speaking to the woman who had quietly created that philosophy alongside her father. Jack slowly stood. His voice was barely audible. Lily. He searched desperately for words. None came. Not because language had abandoned him. Because for the first time in many years, he realized that no carefully constructed argument, no polished legal explanation, and no persuasive speech possessed enough weight to erase the quiet truth sitting only a few feet away. And the meeting was far from over. The legal documents proving Lily's ownership had now been revealed. But another set of files still rested unopened before Michael Hayes. Files that had nothing to do with hidden identities, and everything to do with the professional consequences Jack had not yet begun to imagine. No one spoke for nearly a full minute. The silence inside the boardroom felt different now. Before it had been the silence of uncertainty. Now it was the silence that follows undeniable truth. Jack Richardson remained standing beside his chair, one hand resting on the polished walnut table as though he needed its support to remain upright. The legal documents proving Lily's ownership still lay open before him. The signatures, the corporate seals, the notarized certificates. Everything he had spent the last several minutes hoping might somehow be fabricated had already been confirmed by every person in the room. But Daniel Brooks knew the meeting was not yet finished. He looked toward Michael Hayes. We should continue. Michael nodded. The remaining agenda concerns candidate evaluation for outside legal counsel. His tone remained entirely professional. There was no anger, no satisfaction, only procedure. He opened another leather portfolio. Unlike the documents proving Lily's ownership, these files bore the logo of Maison Étoile's legal compliance office. Each page had been indexed, dated, cross-referenced. Every conclusion was supported by evidence. Michael looked toward Jack. Mr. Richardson, everything discussed from this point concerns your application to represent Maison Étoile. It is separate from your marriage. It is separate from Mrs. Richardson's ownership. It concerns only professional evaluation. Jack swallowed slowly. I understand. Michael continued. As general counsel, I have a duty to determine whether outside legal representatives align with this company's governance standards. He pressed a button on the conference room console. A large screen illuminated once again. This time, there were no videos. Instead, several corporate documents appeared. Conflict of interest review, professional ethics verification, client representation analysis. Michael spoke clearly. First, our investigation found no evidence that Richardson and Cole violated any law regarding Hamilton Biotech. Jack looked visibly relieved. Michael continued before the relief could settle. Second, we found no evidence that you improperly accessed confidential information belonging to Maison Étoile. Jack nodded once. Thank you. Michael acknowledged the point. Those findings remain in your favor. Lily quietly appreciated Michael's fairness. Facts deserved recognition, regardless of circumstance. Then the screen changed. Another document appeared. Corporate Representation Assessment. Michael folded his hands. The remaining issue concerns judgment. Jack frowned slightly. What do you mean? Daniel answered. When outside counsel speaks publicly, their clients naturally assume those statements reflect values compatible with the organizations they represent. Sarah Bennett added calmly, luxury companies don't hire attorneys only for legal expertise. They also become ambassadors. Michael displayed several quotations from the previous 2 days. Luxury isn't meant for everyone. Perception matters more than authenticity. People who contradict the image weaken the brand. A body like hers wasn't exactly what Maison Étoile had in mind. The room remained silent while Jack reread his own words. Michael spoke again. None of these statements are illegal. They are your opinions. But they directly contradict Maison Étoile's governing principles. Thomas Green opened a financial report. Our customers now represent every age, every ethnicity, every body type. They purchase our products because they believe we respect them. Sarah looked toward Jack. If our outside counsel publicly argues otherwise, sir, what message would that send? Jack had no immediate answer. Daniel finally asked, would you like to respond? Jack drew a slow breath. Yes. For the first time since entering the headquarters that morning, his confidence was gone. He spoke without rehearsed charm, without polished delivery, without the certainty that had once defined him. I believed luxury depended on aspiration. He paused. I thought customers wanted perfection. Sarah asked quietly, perfection according to whom? Jack looked down. I never really asked myself that. Michael remained attentive. Jack continued. I grew up believing success meant looking successful. My parents measured achievement by appearances. My law firm rewards confidence. My clients expect certainty. He looked around the room. Somewhere along the way, I stopped separating image from value. No one interrupted. He continued speaking. And when Lily became sick, his voice faltered. I kept telling myself I was helping. I thought encouraging her to lose weight was kindness. He closed his eyes briefly. But that's not what I was doing. He looked toward Lily. I was ashamed. The admission settled heavily over the room. Lily watched him carefully. She had expected excuses. Instead, she heard honesty, painful honesty. Jack continued. I wasn't ashamed because she changed. I was ashamed because I cared too much about what strangers might think. He shook his head slowly. And I kept calling that love. Daniel listened quietly. Then he asked one final question. If Maison Étoile offered you this legal contract today, what would you do differently? Jack thought for several seconds, longer than anyone had ever seen him think before answering. Finally, he spoke. I would decline it. Several directors looked surprised. Michael raised an eyebrow. You would, Jack nodded. Yes. Not because I don't want it. Because I haven't earned the privilege of representing values I clearly failed to understand. Silence followed. This time, it felt different. Not uncomfortable. Reflective. Daniel turned toward the board. Thank you. He looked at Michael. Recommendation. Michael closed the compliance folder. My recommendation is that Richardson and Cole not be appointed outside counsel at this time. Not because of legal misconduct. Not because of professional incompetence. But because the company's values require alignment beyond technical ability. Thomas Green nodded. I agree. Sarah Bennett spoke next. So do I. One by one, every independent director voted. The decision was unanimous. Daniel recorded the result. The resolution passes. He turned toward Jack. Mr. Richardson, Maison Étoile appreciates the professionalism demonstrated during this review. However, the board has decided not to proceed with your firm's appointment. Jack lowered his head. I understand. There was no argument, no protest, no attempt to negotiate. Perhaps for the first time in years, he understood that not every decision could be won through persuasion. Daniel closed the official record. The candidate evaluation is complete. Michael stopped the encrypted recording system. The small red light disappeared. The formal board meeting had ended, but Lily remained seated. She quietly looked toward Michael. One more request? Of course. I don't want today's videos released. Michael nodded immediately. They won't be. I don't want internal staff discussing this. I'll issue confidentiality reminders. I don't want anyone mocking Jack. Daniel looked at her. Even after everything, Lily answered softly. Humiliation didn't teach him. Understanding might. Sarah's eyes softened. That single sentence reminded every executive why Richard Richardson had trusted only one person to inherit his life's work. Lily stood slowly. She gathered her notebook, closed the final folder, then looked toward Jack. Would you walk with me? He nodded almost immediately. They left the boardroom together. No reporters waited outside, no employees gathered in the hallway. Daniel had quietly cleared the executive floor minutes earlier. Only silence accompanied them as they entered a private rooftop garden overlooking Manhattan. The city stretched endlessly beyond the stone railing. Yellow taxis flowed through the streets below. The Hudson River shimmered beneath the afternoon sun. Neither spoke at first. Jack finally broke the silence. I don't know how to apologize. Lily looked toward the skyline. I know. I've practiced speeches in my head ever since. He stopped. There aren't enough words. She nodded gently. No. He looked at her. Did you ever hate me? She answered without hesitation. No. He looked surprised. I was disappointed. She rested both hands lightly on the railing. There's a difference. Jack lowered his eyes. I understand that now. She smiled sadly. I think you finally do. For several quiet moments, they simply watched the city. Then Lily reached into her handbag. Not for legal papers, not for financial documents. Instead, she slowly removed the familiar leather notebook, the notebook that had silently accompanied her through years of overlooked pain. She held it gently in both hands. "There is one last thing you should read." Jack looked at the worn brown cover. He knew immediately that whatever rested inside those pages would hurt far more than losing a corporate contract ever could. And Lily, after years of writing without demanding to be heard, was finally ready to let every carefully recorded memory speak for itself. The rooftop garden overlooked nearly all of Midtown Manhattan. From that height, the noise of the city softened into something distant, almost peaceful. Yellow taxis looked like tiny moving lights. Ferries crossed the Hudson with quiet determination. Office workers hurried along sidewalks without knowing that only a few stories above them, two lives were quietly coming apart. A cool autumn breeze lifted a few strands of Lily Richardson's hair. She rested both hands on the leather notebook before finally offering it to Jack. "I think it's time." Jack accepted it carefully. For years, he had seen that notebook on kitchen tables beside Lily's coffee mug, inside her handbag, and on the nightstand beside their bed. He had joked about it more than once. "You'd make a terrible spy," he had laughed one evening. "Real spies don't write everything down." She had smiled politely. Now he realized she had never been collecting secrets. She had been preserving reality. The notebook felt surprisingly heavy, not because of its leather cover, because of everything it contained. Lily stepped back slightly. "You can read. I'll wait." Jack opened the first page. Inside, the handwriting was small, neat, and remarkably consistent. There were no dramatic paragraphs, no emotional accusations. Each entry contained only a date and a simple description, like evidence. The first pages were different from what he expected. April 6th. Jack surprised me with flowers after work. He looked exhausted, but smiled the whole evening. "I think he's trying very hard to build us a good life." Jack paused. He turned another page. June 18th. We walked along Lake Michigan. He held my hand the entire time. "I hope we never become too busy to do this again." Another. September 2nd. Jack made pancakes, even though he burned half of them. We laughed until midnight. He smiled sadly. He had almost forgotten those moments. Another page. December 24th. Jack bought matching Christmas sweaters. He said home should always feel safe. His hands began trembling. The notebook had not begun with pain. It had begun with love. Real love. Patient love. Hopeful love. He continued reading. The dates moved forward. Years passed, one page at a time. Then the tone slowly changed. March 3rd. The doctor confirmed my thyroid condition today. Jack held my hand during the appointment. He promised we would face everything together. Another page, July 11th. Medication is helping my health, not my weight. Jack says we'll figure it out. I believe him. Jack swallowed hard. Then came another entry, October 9th. Jack asked whether the medicine was making me lazy. He apologized immediately. I don't think he meant to hurt me. Another, January 15th. Jack suggested joining a private gym because people might stare less. He probably thinks he's helping. Another, May 28th. Jack asked whether I should skip the company dinner. He said photographs last forever. I smiled. I don't think he noticed I cried after he fell asleep. Jack stopped reading. His breathing grew uneven. "Lily?" She shook her head gently. "Keep going." He obeyed. The entries became shorter, quieter, more painful because they contained almost no emotion. August 4th. Jack introduced every colleague except me. November 22nd. Jack laughed when someone called me brave for wearing a fitted dress. February 9th. Jack asked whether surgery would improve my confidence. April 17th. Jack apologized to a waiter for ordering dessert with me. June 30th. Jack looked relieved when I stayed home. September 14th. Jack said success requires sacrifice. I wonder if he realizes I became part of the sacrifice. Jack closed his eyes. His vision blurred. He turned another page. The handwriting remained perfectly steady. Never angry, never hateful, only honest. Then he reached the entry from the gala. September 25th. Jack laughed at my dress in front of strangers. No tears, no shouting, no defense, only silence. I realized tonight that the people who respected me most were the ones who never knew I owned anything. Jack could not continue. He closed the notebook. His hands shook uncontrollably. I'm sorry. His voice barely existed. I'm so... He stopped. Every apology sounded too small. Lily looked at him quietly. Do you know why I finally let you read it? He shook his head. Because I wanted you to see something. What? You weren't cruel every day. Jack looked confused. She gently opened the notebook again. Most people think marriages fail because of one terrible moment. She turned several pages. They usually don't. Another page. They fail because hundreds of small moments slowly replace kindness. She looked at him. You didn't wake up one morning deciding to humiliate me. No. You simply stopped noticing. Jack covered his face with both hands. I did. I know. For several moments, neither spoke. The wind carried the scent of autumn leaves across the rooftop garden. Finally, Jack asked, When did you stop loving me? Lily answered almost immediately. I didn't. He looked surprised. I stopped believing you loved all of me. Silence returned. Jack sat down slowly on a nearby stone bench. I kept thinking. He struggled to organize his thoughts. I kept believing that if you lost weight, everything would be like before. Lily nodded gently. I know, but that's impossible. She sat across from him. Because my body wasn't the real problem. Jack lowered his eyes. My heart was. She did not answer. She didn't need to. The sentence was true enough on its own. Several minutes passed. Then Jack looked towards her again. I understand why you never told me. Lily waited. If I'd known who you were, I probably would have behaved differently. She nodded once. Exactly. And you wanted to know whether I loved Lily? Or the owner of Maison Étoile? Yes. He laughed bitterly. I failed. She looked at the skyline. You answered the question. Jack's shoulders slumped. I don't deserve another chance. She remained quiet. I know that too. He looked toward her. Then why are you still here? Lily thought for a moment before answering. Because endings deserve honesty. She reached into her handbag once more. This time she removed a cream-colored envelope. Unlike the notebook, it carried the logo of a Chicago law firm. Not Richardson and Cole. Another firm. She placed it gently on the bench between them. Jack stared at it. His heart sank before he even touched it. What is it? You already know. Slowly, he opened the envelope. Inside rested a carefully prepared legal document. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Illinois Family Court. Petitioner Lily Richardson. His eyes stopped there. Everything else blurred. The filing date was yesterday morning, before the executive meeting, before his world collapsed, before he knew her secret. She had already made her decision. Jack looked up slowly. You planned this. She answered honestly. No. I accepted it. He struggled to speak. So, there's nothing I can say. Lily looked at him with quiet compassion. There are things worth saying. But they won't change what already happened. He closed the folder carefully. For the first time in years, he understood something that no courtroom had ever taught him. Some losses could not be negotiated. Some contracts once broken could not simply be rewritten. Not because forgiveness was impossible. Because trust had quietly disappeared long before either person admitted it. Michael Hayes stepped onto the rooftop a respectful distance away. He did not interrupt immediately. After waiting several moments, he spoke gently. "Lily." She turned. "The documents are ready whenever you are." She nodded. "Thank you." Michael approached, but addressed Jack first. "Mr. Richardson." Jack stood slowly. Michael extended a folder. "These are the divorce papers. There is no request for punitive damages. No request regarding your personal assets. No request for public disclosure." Jack looked confused. Michael continued. "Mrs. Richardson has instructed our office that the proceedings remain entirely private." He paused. "She also asked that every confidentiality agreement protecting Maison Étoile remain fully honored." Jack looked toward Lily. "You could destroy my career." She answered softly. "I don't want to. You could tell every newspaper. I won't. You could embarrass me the way I embarrassed you." She shook her head. "I already know what humiliation feels like." Her voice remained calm. "I don't want someone else carrying it simply because I did." Jack felt tears forming for the first time in many years. Not because he had lost a client. Not because he had lost an extraordinary opportunity. But because he finally understood the difference between power and character. He had spent years chasing power. Lily had quietly lived with character. And that was why, even while ending their marriage, she still refused to become the person who had hurt her. 3 months passed before the public learned what the fashion industry had whispered about for years. Not everything. Only what Lily Richardson decided the world was finally ready to know. The divorce proceedings remained exactly as she had promised. Private, respectful. No interviews, no accusations, no leaked court documents. The Illinois court finalized the dissolution of the marriage without public spectacle. The settlement reflected the same restraint that had characterized Lily throughout the process. She asked for nothing beyond what the law already recognized as hers. Jack Richardson did the same. Neither attempted to punish the other financially. Neither sought revenge through headlines. The marriage simply ended. Quietly. For Jack, however, silence proved more difficult than public criticism would have been. He returned to Chicago carrying 2 separate losses. The first was professional. The second was deeply personal. At Richardson & Cole, news spread quickly that Maison Étoile had selected another international law firm to oversee its expanding European legal portfolio. No one blamed Jack directly. His partners simply accepted the business decision. "These things happen," the managing partner told him. "They do." Jack answered honestly. But inside, he knew the contract had never truly been lost inside a boardroom. It had been lost much earlier, at dinner tables, in hallways, during ordinary conversations, in countless small moments when he had chosen appearance over compassion. The realization followed him everywhere. One afternoon, he entered a coffee shop near the office. A young woman struggled to fit comfortably into one of the narrow chairs. Without thinking, Jack almost smiled the way he once would have. Then he stopped. Instead, he quietly moved another chair beside her table. "It has more room." She looked surprised. "Thank you." He simply nodded before walking away. No one noticed the moment. No one applauded. But Jack did. For the first time in years, he caught himself choosing kindness before judgment. It did not erase the past. It only reminded him that the future remained unwritten. Meanwhile, life inside Maison Étoile entered a new chapter. Daniel Brooks stood before the executive committee one Monday morning. The campaign is ready. Large presentation boards surrounded the conference room. Photographs, advertising concepts, store displays, media schedules. At the center of every proposal appeared the same title: Luxury has no size. The slogan had originated from a sentence Lily had written years earlier in one of her private design notebooks. Luxury should welcome people, not ask permission to deserve beauty. Sarah Bennett smiled. The retailers love it. Thomas Green reviewed financial forecasts. International buyers are responding even better than expected. Daniel looked toward Lily. There's one remaining question. She knew what he meant. Whether I should appear publicly? Yes. For 6 years, Lily had remained invisible. Journalists knew the company had an owner. No one knew her name. Now the board believed that hiding any longer might contradict the campaign itself. If Maison Étoile truly wanted to celebrate dignity beyond appearance, perhaps its own owner should no longer remain hidden. Lily remained thoughtful. My father believed privacy protected the work. Daniel nodded. He did. Sarah added gently, but your work now protects other people. Lily looked at the campaign photographs spread across the table. Women of different ages, different ethnicities, different body shapes. None of them appeared heavily retouched. Their expressions reflected confidence rather than perfection. She smiled softly. Then perhaps it's time. Preparations began immediately. Not for a celebrity interview, not for a glamorous magazine cover. Instead, Maison Étoile announced a press conference introducing the company's long-serving owner. The statement contained only a few sentences. The owner of Maison Étoile will address the future direction of the company during next month's collection presentation. No further details were offered. Speculation exploded across the fashion industry. Television commentators guessed. Business journalists investigated. Former employees searched old records. No one found the answer, because Lily had almost never allowed herself to be photographed. On the morning of the announcement, the company's Manhattan headquarters overflowed with reporters. Daniel Brooks opened the event exactly on schedule. Ladies and gentlemen, for many years, Maison Étoile honored the final wishes of our founder by protecting the privacy of the company's owner. He paused. Today, with her permission, that privacy ends. Every camera in the room focused toward the stage entrance. Lily walked forward. She wore a charcoal gray dress designed from the upcoming collection. Elegant, simple, without unnecessary decoration. No dramatic music accompanied her arrival. No spotlight followed her. She simply walked to the podium. Several journalists stared in disbelief. One reporter whispered, "That's impossible." Another quickly searched old corporate records. Others recognized her immediately. The woman from the gala. The woman who had quietly attended executive meetings. The woman no one had truly noticed. Lily waited until the room became completely silent. Then she spoke. My name is Lily Richardson. I've had the privilege of serving as owner of Maison Étoile for 6 years. Flashbulbs illuminated the room. Questions nearly erupted immediately. Daniel gently raised one hand. There will be time. Lily continued. My father believed fashion should never decide who deserves dignity. I believe the same. She looked across the audience. Every collection we create begins with one question. Will someone feel more respected after wearing it? If the answer is no, we begin again. The room remained remarkably quiet. She never mentioned Jack, never mentioned the gala, never referred to her marriage. Instead, she spoke about craftsmanship, responsibility, inclusion, design. When questions finally began, one reporter raised the issue everyone expected. Miss Richardson, there have been rumors that your company recently rejected a prominent legal firm after an internal review. Lily answered calmly, Maison Étoile does not discuss confidential personnel decisions. Another reporter asked, were those decisions connected to your personal life? She smiled politely. My personal life belongs to me. My professional responsibilities belong to Maison Étoile. The answer ended the subject immediately. No gossip, no scandal, no public humiliation. Exactly as she intended. Across the country in Chicago, Jack watched the press conference from his office television. No one else remained in the conference room. He had closed the door before the broadcast began. He listened carefully to every word. When Lily spoke about dignity, he recognized sentences he had once heard her whisper while sketching late at night. Ideas he had ignored. Dreams he had never bothered to ask about. Only now did he realize how often she had quietly revealed herself. He had simply never listened. The interview ended. The television commentators praised Lily's composure. Business analysts discussed Maison Étoile's future. Fashion critics celebrated the campaign's message. No one mentioned Jack Richardson. His greatest fear had once been public embarrassment. Instead, the world simply moved forward without him. Oddly, that felt even more honest. Several days later, Daniel entered Lily's office, carrying updated sales reports. The campaign exceeded every projection. She looked up from a design sketch. I'm glad. Our adaptive collection sold out online. Wonderful. Daniel smiled. There's one more thing. He handed her a customer letter. A woman from Oregon had written after purchasing one of the new dresses. The final paragraph read, I spent 20 years believing luxury stores weren't built for women like me. Yesterday I looked in the mirror and cried because for the first time I didn't feel hidden. Lily folded the letter carefully. For several moments she said nothing. Then she placed it inside the same leather notebook that had once preserved years of quiet pain. Daniel noticed. You still carry it. I always will. It reminds me of Jack. She shook her head. No. She smiled gently. It reminds me why this company exists. Daniel understood immediately. The notebook no longer represented suffering. It had become evidence of something stronger. That dignity quietly protected long enough could eventually become the foundation upon which thousands of strangers rediscovered their own. And only one chapter remained before Lily's journey reached its final destination. Nearly 1 year after the night that changed everything, Maison Étoile prepared for another collection launch. Unlike the previous gala, this event carried a different purpose. It was no longer about introducing the world to a hidden owner. The world already knew Lily Richardson's name. Instead, it was about proving that the values she had quietly protected for years were not simply words spoken during a press conference. They had become the company's future. The venue overlooked the Hudson River. Floor-to-ceiling windows welcomed the fading light of an autumn evening. White lilies, Richard Richardson's favorite flowers, decorated the entrance instead of extravagant floral sculptures. There were no oversized logos, no unnecessary displays of wealth. Everything reflected restraint. Everything reflected intention. Fashion journalists noticed the difference immediately. One reporter remarked that Maison Étoile no longer seemed interested in impressing people. It seemed interested in welcoming them. Backstage designers made final adjustments before the presentation. Models stood side by side. Some were tall, some were short. Some had visible scars. Some used prosthetic limbs. Some wore sizes rarely represented on international runways. No one had been selected because they fit a single standard of beauty. They had been chosen because they represented real lives. Lily walked quietly through the preparation area. She greeted every designer by name. She thanked each tailor. She adjusted a sleeve here, straightened a collar there. To the youngest intern, she offered the same attention she gave the creative director. Daniel Brooks watched from a distance. Sarah Bennett smiled. Richard would have loved tonight. Daniel nodded. He already did. Sarah looked at him curiously. What do you mean? Daniel glanced toward Lily. She became everything he hoped the company would become. The lights dimmed. Guests gradually took their seats. The audience included museum curators, investors, journalists, designers, scholarship recipients, and longtime employees. One seat near the back of the room remained occupied by a man wearing a simple navy suit. Jack Richardson. He had not requested a special invitation. He had not attempted to contact Lily. 3 months earlier, he had received a handwritten note from Daniel Brooks. You are welcome to attend as a guest, if you wish. Nothing more. No explanation, no promises. Jack almost declined. Then he remembered something Lily had once written in her notebook. Endings deserve honesty. He decided that perhaps so did beginnings. He entered quietly. He chose a seat where almost no one recognized him. He had no desire to be seen. The music began. The first model stepped onto the runway, then another, then another. Every garment reflected quiet elegance rather than dramatic spectacle. The collection celebrated movement instead of restriction, comfort without sacrificing craftsmanship, sophistication without demanding perfection. The audience applauded repeatedly. Fashion critics filled notebooks. Editors exchanged impressed glances. Near the end of the presentation, the lights softened again. A single spotlight illuminated the entrance. Lily appeared. She wore the midnight blue gown, the same gown Jack had mocked a year earlier. Nothing had been altered. The fabric still flowed with graceful simplicity. The hidden silver star still rested inside the collar. The dress had become the closing piece of the collection, not because it was the most expensive, because it represented the heart of everything Maison Étoile believed. The audience rose to its feet almost immediately. Applause filled the room. Some people recognized the gown from photographs taken during the previous year's gala. Most simply admired its quiet beauty. Jack stared silently. He remembered every careless word he had spoken that night. He remembered laughing, remembered believing the dress diminished the brand. Now thousands of people celebrated the very design he had dismissed. Not because opinions had changed, because truth had finally become visible. When the applause gradually settled, Lily stepped toward the microphone. She looked across the audience before speaking. My father used to ask every young designer the same question. She smiled softly. Who are you designing for? She paused. For many years. I thought the answer was simple. I believed we designed clothing. A few gentle smiles appeared throughout the audience. I was wrong. She looked toward the models standing behind her. We design confidence. We design dignity. We design moments when someone looks in a mirror and finally feels welcomed instead of judged. Silence spread gently across the hall. She continued. Luxury should never become permission. It should become an invitation to celebrate the life someone already lives. She glanced briefly toward the front row, where several scholarship students listened with shining eyes. Our measurements may differ. Our stories certainly do, but respect has never required identical bodies. It has only required identical humanity. The audience remained completely still. No one wanted to interrupt. Lily took a slow breath. I've learned something over the past year. People often ask where strength comes from. She smiled gently. I don't think strength comes from winning. I think it comes from refusing to become the person who hurt you. For a brief moment, her eyes drifted toward the back of the room, toward Jack. She did not call his name. She did not accuse him. She did not thank him. She simply looked. Then her attention returned to the audience. If our work helps even one person believe they deserve kindness without first changing themselves, then every hour spent creating it has been worthwhile. She stepped away from the microphone. The applause lasted several minutes, not because of dramatic words, because the audience believed them. Backstage reporters requested exclusive interviews. Lily accepted only a few. Each conversation focused on design craftsmanship and future scholarship programs. Whenever questions drifted toward her divorce, she politely redirected them. There are more important stories tonight. By the end of the evening, guests slowly departed beneath the clear Manhattan sky. Jack remained seated until almost everyone else had left. Finally, he stood. He did not approach Lily. He did not attempt another apology. He understood that forgiveness, if it ever came, belonged to her alone. As he walked toward the exit, Daniel Brooks caught up with him. Mr. Richardson. Jack turned. Good evening. Daniel extended his hand. Jack accepted it. I wanted to thank you for coming. I wasn't sure I should. Daniel smiled kindly. Sometimes witnessing the ending matters. Jack nodded. It does. Before leaving, he looked once more toward the empty runway. I used to think success meant being admired. Daniel asked quietly. And now, Jack answered after a long pause, I think success begins when the people closest to you feel safe standing beside you. Daniel smiled. I believe Richard Richardson would have agreed. Jack left without another word. Inside the now quiet venue, Lily walked alone onto the empty runway one final time. Workers had already begun removing decorations. The lights above were gradually dimming. She looked across the rows of empty seats. 1 year earlier, she had stood beneath similar lights while her husband laughed at her. Tonight, she stood in the same kind of silence, but it no longer felt lonely. She opened the leather notebook one last time. Beneath the final written entry, she added a single sentence. Some journeys do not end when justice arrives. They end when peace quietly takes its place. She closed the notebook, smiled gently, then walked toward the exit without looking back. Not because she had forgotten the past, but because she no longer needed to carry it. In every life, there are moments when people decide what another person is worth before learning who they truly are. Sometimes they judge by appearance, sometimes by status, sometimes by circumstances that reveal nothing about the heart beneath them. Lily's journey reminds us that quiet strength is rarely recognized in the moment. It grows through patience, integrity, and the difficult choice to let truth speak louder than anger. Justice, when it finally arrives, does not always sound like celebration. More often, it arrives as calm as clarity, and as the freedom to walk away without carrying bitterness. Jack's story reminds us of something equally important. A single cruel moment rarely appears without countless smaller choices that came before it. Yet acknowledging those choices is where genuine change begins. While consequences cannot always be undone, humility can still shape the person we become afterward. If this story moved you, I'd love to know your thoughts. Have you ever seen someone underestimated because of their appearance? Or have you witnessed quiet dignity change the outcome of a difficult situation? If stories like this resonate with you, consider liking the video, sharing your perspective in the comments, and subscribing for more journeys where compassion, truth, and justice quietly find their place.